This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
Hey, what's happening? It's a Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill, brought to you by PointsBet Canada and Montana's. What's happening on this Thursday, Rosie? I can't believe it. We're one more sleep away from our alumni box tour tomorrow.
That's true, man. Me and my brother are getting ready. I'm feeling a little bit better about myself, and I'll be a little more ready to go. Hopefully you're over the nasty stomach flu, so we'll be ready to rock this weekend.
Yeah, so I should preface by saying, so Rosie's coming down tomorrow. He messages me like Monday. He's like, just so you know, I'm probably taking it easy in Toronto after what transpired in Vegas. He had a rough weekend in Vegas. Don't we all have a rough weekend in Vegas? But I figured the tune would change as we got closer to the big night and the pasta in the press box and the copious amounts of alcohol. I think we'll be rolling tomorrow night. I just have that feeling.
I think we'll be all right. Maybe I'll play the role of taking care of you two dummies a little bit more than I normally would, but that's about as far as I think I'll be able to manage myself.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll see how long that lasts. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Also, as we mentioned in the last couple of days, we got a brand spanking new YouTube page for all of you to subscribe to. Easy for me to say, at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, as you see on your screen. We've got a lot of clips and interviews and shorts and everything to put up there. So make sure to check that out, because we will be creating over full time over the next couple weeks, 3 weeks or so, where we'll be doing our live show from there. So at the Leafs Nation 401. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a line down in the chat down below here on YouTube. We'll get to them a bit later on. We got a big guest on today's show as well. In about 10 minutes from now, from 32 Thoughts, the podcast, from Sportsnet, from Hockey Night in Canada, the NHL Insider himself, Elliotte Friedman's going to pop by. And Jay, we're going to get into some trade questions. I know you love that.
Yeah, why not break that open? If you're going to talk to someone, he's one of the best men out there. But for people that don't know Elliotte Friedman as well, when we started this show, man, I'd been kind of out of the game for many years, and I was only as big of an impact player as I was, and he still reaches out, man, hits me up on my DMs and says, hey dude, great to see you in the media, good luck with the show, I'll be watching you guys. And it's just like, dude, for you to follow up on that many people and care about that many people, he's truly one of the good guys in the game, and I don't think you could scour the hockey world and find anyone that would say a bad word about Elliotte Friedman. So excited to have him on again and pick his brain a little bit about what this team's doing behind the scenes.
And of course, it comes full circle. I did my hardest work behind the scenes, and I coaxed Elliotte into coming on this show in about 10 minutes from now. So that's coming up. But for now, let's get over the boards. Hey, you like the description. Air Marner. What a game for Mitch Marner. What a game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They stuck with it. The fact that for the second straight game, Ilya Samsonov outduels a premier netminder in this league. Marner wins it in OT, and Samsonov 14-0-1 at Scotiabank Arena. Impeccable, Rosie.
Yeah, that's unreal, man. You go back to September when everyone's rolling their eyes and saying what they were saying about getting these two goaltenders. And, I don't think that there was a reason to doubt him at the time. First rounder, and, things didn't work out in Washington. It's not very often guys waive a first round goalie and just kind of let him go. But, there was lots left in the tank for him, and he's a talented goaltender. And, for whatever happened with him in Washington, you got to remember that was the COVID bubble, and there was all kinds of garbage to deal with personally and mentally. And I just think that we scooped him up and had a guy like Matt Murray to be a tandem with him. And so far it's gone unbelievably. So you're not hearing anyone saying too much about him right now, are you?
You're not. That is for sure. And a really, really strong pickup for Cal Dubas and company in the offseason. What a finish by Marner once again. We were talking about him in the PointsBet Canada Bet of the Day yesterday, how he could pick up his play considering he didn't get a point the other night against the Islanders, how the Rangers ended his point streak, and then he promptly scores the OT winner here, and a beauty at that. The 400th career point for William Nylander. The beat goes on for him. Thought Timothy Liljegren, too, was really, really good last night. Had 1-1. He's really stepped up as of late, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think so too. They're giving him a lot more minutes, and he seems to just be super responsible. And you can tell they're putting more faith in him right now. And, more often than not, you're just seeing him doing solid things. And, a lot of defensemen like him, you feel like they had a good night if you didn't notice them too much. And I think that's why some guys like him don't get the accolades maybe that they deserve. But then he steps up last night with some big plays and getting points on the board. And it's nice to see when a guy steps up like that. And I think he's deserving of it. And I think that keeps putting some faith in him as well with the amount of minutes that he's been gobbling up here the last few weeks as well. So that's just solid to see this time of year.
What was Zibanejad doing on that OT winner? Can you explain to me?
Dude, that's the second overtime where I'm watching a guy, like they must have like some kind of plan where it's just like, if I have eyes on a
Yeah,
guy, I am locked on him and I am not moving. But for a guy like Zibanejad with his understanding of the game and his vision and his knowledge of like what a scoring chance is and whatnot, he looked like his controller came unplugged and he was just
it died.
he just literally let Mitch Marner just walk right around, didn't even swing a stick at him, didn't even take an extra little C-cut to try to make it a tougher angle. It was hilarious. I don't know what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were playing man-to-man, to be honest, and maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think also the Rangers are waiting for Austin Matthews to come on the ice because David Kempf took the opening face-off. So I think they're waiting to reset at that, but Marner's like, the hell with it. And I think you realize when a defenseman, or when a forward, I should say, is skating backwards, and he took full advantage. But you're right. It was like the controller died, and Zibanejad looked behind, and it's like, oh, Marner's already past him. He took him off the dribble, to use an NBA term, right?
Yeah, whatever it was gross. And sometimes it's funny because you're going to start with some pretty high offensive players. And if they don't win that draw and they get hemmed in their D zone, sometimes they just look lost. And it was a pretty bad one there for Big Z.
All right, so let's roll this video, and I caught this, luckily. I don't miss this type of stuff. You know this, Rosie. Maybe I'm too old school for the new demographic and generation, but let's roll this clip from my Twitter yesterday in the game. So Keandre Miller hammers Timothy Liljegren, up for debate whether it's a penalty. It wasn't called a penalty, but look at the flybys around Miller after the hit was delivered. This is it. Like, where do you want to start, Rosie?
Well, it's tough. It's that line that was out there. I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to see Michael Bunting just spring load his gloves, chuck a couple at him, then wrestle him down to the ice and, get up in front of their bench and says, you don't pull that shit on this team, and that's what you'd love to see. But at the end of the day, that's a pretty big boy there with Miller. And man, the guy's just like, didn't see that. Nobody saw that, right? But it's tough watching that kind of stuff. Obviously, you don't want Marner or Matthews jumping in there. We've talked about that on this show. That's the last thing they need to do. I'd love it if Bunting had a little bit more in the tank as far as doing more than just mouthing off. But someone on Twitter recently said that he's literally the new Tucker right now. And I just, my eyes went back to, some of the Rock'em Sock'ems that I threw in the VCR, seeing the way Tucker played. And I was just like, man, what a bad take that is. Because I think I said Tucker would have spring loaded his gloves into the stands and swan dived into the bloody bench at that point in time. But none of that from this Leafs team. And I wish they'd have a little bit more grit. I'd wish a guy like Engvall, who is 6'5", 200 and whatever, would have a little bit more jam in there and was capable of grabbing a guy by the scruff of the neck and saying, hey, that's not happening. And whatever happens after that, you just do it. You just wrestle the guy, do what you got to do. And some guys just, it's not even in their minds.
I understand it's not their forte, but like, cross-check him or something. Like, I get it, and that's the oldest excuse while he's like half his size. And for Marner, like, I think it even looks worse for Marner to like half grab him. But like, your impression of Keandre Miller after that hit, like he's strolling through like Central Park on a Sunday morning, not a care in the world. After there's no retribution. I don't even know if anybody from the bench batted an eye. Like, I've never seen that. Maybe in the last like 10 days at least from this team.
And I've felt that before where you do a big hit or do something that draws, the crowd's attention and everyone stands up and you look around, you're like, nobody's going to touch me. And even the guys on the bench are kind of looking down at their skates. You're like, oh man, I can, like, that's a green light. I can do whatever I want out here. And there's going to be no answering for it. And that's a mindset that you don't want to have the other team having when you're playing against them. You want them to know that, hey, we better tread lightly here because they're not going to let us get away with too much. And I think that just sets the table for them to do whatever they want. Luckily, they don't have too much on their side to really try to run us out of the building. And it's not that style of hockey anymore. I get it, but it is a mindset that I don't think you want your opponents to have against you.
Yeah, we're not going to get too hung up on it, obviously, but I couldn't help but chuckle just that nobody really doing much. Like even Matthews did a skate around, but you're right. Like it's also to the point, like it's the wrong line on the ice, but like let them know you're there, right? Like the old slap shot line, and maybe
Start a
it's too much
scrum.
to preach. Yeah, like do something, man. Like I don't know. I just made did I overreact to that, Rosie?
Not really. It is what it is. It's the wrong line out there, but just the three of them could just converge right on that guy and grab a piece of his jersey and get visor to visor against him. And no one's going to take a penalty there. No one's fighting, but just be like, hey, that doesn't fly, pal. You do that again, we're going to be having a different kind of talk or whatever. Even if it's total BS, you can start a scrum in there and just let the whole building and the whole bench know that we're not just going to skate by and watch and pretend we didn't see that, because it's a bad look.
So against a team like Tampa, who we expect Toronto to play in the first round, what does your ideal bottom six look like? Like we know we talked about it a bit yesterday, but would you have a Simmons in there? Would you have a Dryden Hunt? Do you think they need sort of that bit of kick and edge at least for game one of that series? I know we're talking about game one like 2 months away, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about when the playoffs starts and there's all those series is going on and you're trying to figure out what game to watch, and it doesn't matter what one you watch, the opening draw and the opening 5-10 minutes of every first round playoff series is just banging and crashing and dumping and chasing and banging and chirping. And it's just like super intense. These guys are not banged up yet. They've been prepping for this all year. And I mean, you don't want to get the tone set against you early where you get kind of almost run out of the building physically. You got to have some kind of an answer. And I would love it if Simmons could find his way into this lineup and stick around in there. And I mean, I think he's the perfect guy. I've been saying all year, he's capable of playing minutes. He's a phenomenal hockey player. He's got so many games and so much on his resume. And then his toughness is next to none. I mean, he could literally fight and handle himself against any person in the league. Not that you fight in playoffs, but it's just that presence where you can bang and crash and grab a guy by the back of the neck and say, hey, I'm going to put you through the wall if you even think about doing something like that. And people, guys know that, and they adjust their game accordingly. And I'd love to see a little bit more of that in the Leafs lineup, especially come playoff time.
Yeah, certainly a different ball game, as you referenced, come game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Without further ado, let's bring him in. Our feature presentation on today's show from the 32 Thoughts podcast, from Sportsnet, from Hockey Night in Canada. It's Elliotte Friedman. What's going on, E?
Not much, guys. How you guys doing? Jay, good to see you, man.
You too, man. I was pumping your tires a little bit earlier. Good to see you. And one of the good guys in the game, man. It's great to see you live.
It's great to see you, too. Enjoy listening to the show. I enjoy watching you guys. Like, I used to joke that Justin Bourne and Anthony Stewart, when they did a lot of radio together, I called them the arsonists. They used to set fire to everything. I'm glad to see that you guys have kind of picked up the slack. It's really good.
That's the best thing, because Rosie was just talking. He's like, how does Elliotte Friedman know, A, that I did a show, and B, even remember me from the NHL? But that's the one thing I've learned about you. You know everything, Elliotte.
Well, I don't know. I would say that. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on out there that you don't know. But the thing I really remember about Jay was when he got called up to the Leafs. Well, first of all, like the thing is, you always have great respect. Like if you play one game in the NHL, you're the elite of the elite. Like just to play one game in the NHL makes you an elite player. But I remember, Jay, Dallas Aikens told me a story that you got called up, I think, for like 10 games in a row. He started your line in the Marlies, and you guys went on an unbelievable tear. And I'm listening to what you were just saying about the Lightning in the first 5-10 minutes of a playoff series is all about banging and crashing. He said that you got called up after he started your line with the Marlies about 10 games in a row, and the Marlies had a great record. And he said that he wasn't surprised at all that you got your call up at that time, because you loved it. You just loved going out there and setting the tone and being on the ice for the first shift. You knew you were out there to run over people and let the opponent know that the Marlies meant business. So I always do remember that about you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was a good time, Dallas. I loved his coaching style, and he put a little bit more faith in me than other guys did. And that line we had there, we were just we dumped the puck and crashed, and we were getting points off our asses and off our legs and all kinds of different things. It was a fun time. And then, when you do that down there, sometimes you get the call. So it was nice to be in that organization, being coached by Dallas for sure.
All right, Elliotte, let's get into the conversation. Obviously, the trade
Okay.
deadline, March 3rd. Looking forward to Sunrise next weekend as well. I'm sure you'll be there. So the trade conversation, is there a certain player that comes to mind right away that you think would be a perfect fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs right now?
Well, I'm one of those people who wonders if they should be looking more to forward than defense. I am, but I think the question is not what we think; it's what do they think. And I think since Muzzin's been out, their default has been we have to get a defenseman that plays like Muzzin does. Now, I think at times, because of the way their D has played this year, that they have, I don't know if wavered is the right answer, but I do think internally they have thought, are we good enough here to go start focusing on something else? And the number one thing I think they've said internally is we have time because they probably won't be able to do much until right before the deadline. So we better be sure. I think the way their D has played has given them some rethinking on this. I just think at the end of the day, look, there's the regular season and there's the playoffs. They are two different leagues. And people blame the referees, and I get it. But the bottom line is, I'm one of those people who believe that players change more than the officials do. That you cannot play 28 games in the playoffs. You cannot play 82 games in the regular season like you play 28 games in the playoffs. It's just not possible. I think it's a rougher, meaner, nastier game. And I think that put it this way, any defenseman who could be available, I think they've called on them. I think they've called the team and said, what are you thinking? What are you looking at? What's it going to cost us? What are we going to need to do? And I think they've collected all that information. Any forward who's been available, I think they've done that to some degree too. But what I think the biggest question is going to be, what do they think they need? Because I do think it was a Muzzin type the moment he went down. But at the very least, I think they've reconsidered or taken a look at what does this mean the way that D has played this year.
We've seen a lot of line shuffling in the bottom six lately, and maybe there's just me just free thinking, but do you think the Leafs are quietly setting the table potentially for like an Engvall or a Kerfoot going out the door to free up some money if they have to do something substantial here?
Yes, I do think that's a possibility. The one thing I think about Dubas is he will do things like that. I don't think he's afraid of things like that. The one thing about Kerfoot in particular, and I have been told this several times, that don't forget that Keefe really trusts him. Keefe really trusts Kerfoot. I'm freaked out by my picture being up in two of these sides of the screens here. I'm completely mesmerized by it. And right now, as you showed, he's on the fourth line. And what I think, this is my opinion, but I know that Keefe really trusts Kerfoot. I know that he hasn't scored as much as everybody would have hoped, but if you watch him, he gets put out in situations that you don't get put out in unless the coach believes you can do a job. And I think that I know the organization listens to Keefe on this kind of thing. They do trust their coach. They trust his opinion. My belief is before they move on for Kerfoot, they have to convince Keefe that there are other options. I think they'd like Holmberg to be one of those guys. They were really hoping that Holmberg would be a player this year. Even though his faceoffs are a little bit of a struggle, he's showing that he's going to be something. But in Kerfoot's case in particular, I think they're going to have to convince Keefe that he can't do the job, or someone can do the job better.
Rosie, you got one?
Yeah, and talk a little bit, Elliotte. I mean, you go on Twitter and you're looking around to fans and people who aren't really in the game as much, and they'll say things like just trade Kerfoot and trade Engvall and do this and do that, and they don't understand how hard is it to put together not just a trade, but a trade that you feel like you're winning. You don't just make a trade for the sake of making it, but for someone to take Kerfoot at $3.5 million or Engvall at almost $2.5 million is a difficult thing to do, and you got to convince them to give you something that you think is even more valuable than that when those guys probably aren't even playing up to their cap crunch right now. So just put in perspective how difficult it is for GMs to work those phones and to actually get a deal in place.
I think it is hard. I think it's really hard this year, Jay, when and the phrase I use is constipated. We've got a constipated league because there's no cap room and so many teams are an LTIR. I think that makes it even more difficult. Kerfoot's case is a little interesting because most of his salary is paid. So I think the good thing about Kerfoot is that his bonus is done. So like his actual cash is very low, and I think that will make him attractive. In a lot of cases, Jay, yes, you have to attach something to move these players. The one thing I'm starting to wonder about here, though, is I'm beginning to wonder if this is going to be a buyer's market. I've heard there are some teams out there that are trying to sell who are a little bit worried that there aren't going to be a ton of buyers, and therefore the sellers are worried that they might, be the person who goes home alone at the bar at 2 a.m. if they don't do something. So, and I think some of the buyers are really hoping that's the case, that some of the sellers might panic. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah, the Montreal Canadiens are one team that comes to mind right away. Even like an asset like Sean Monahan's had a pretty good season, but you look at the center depth in the market at that front, so it should be intriguing on that front. The name that always comes up, as you know, in the Maple Leafs market, Matthew Nyes. If the right deal comes along, is it your understanding the Leafs would be open to having that conversation?
Well, the one thing I think about Dubas is he doesn't shut anything down, but I think he has guidelines. Like I remember last year, he told teams that he's not trading knives for a rental. Like he's not doing that, and I would suspect that's still the same. You know, the one thing I think about a lot is I think a lot about Anthopoulos and the way he left, and Anthopoulos took his shot. And the reason he took his shot was, if you'll remember, the Blue Jays didn't have a great record that year, but their run differential was excellent. And he took a shot based on that, and he proved that he was right to take that shot. I think Dubas will take a shot with this team because I think they're good. Like, the biggest, what's the biggest challenge Toronto has? You guys have talked about it. They're getting a team who's lost one playoff series in 3 years in the first round of the playoffs. The division is brutal, and that's what they've got. I think Dubas will take a shot. I just think that the one thing about him is that he said he won't do Nyes for a rental. And I would be very surprised to see him change that stance.
Couple more and I'll get you out of here. So we had Anthony Stewart, my good buddy, on the show last week. You guys had a fantastic panel. I think it was last week where you polled on the next Pasternak contract, what that would look like. So we're going to translate that to the Leafs world because there's a guy named Willie Nylander. Elliott's having a remarkable year, eligible for a new contract as early as next summer. What's that next contract look like for Nylander in your opinion?
Well, I think I'm going to use the old Lamoriello line here. If you have time, use it. And because you got to do Matthews first. Like, I think they're going to want to have Matt. Like, there's no way we can go into next year without Matthews signed. No way. Like, can you imagine the gong show that's going to be all of next season if Matthews enters the year unsigned? Like, you will not be able to talk about anything else. William Nylander just set a new NHL record with 14 points against the Sabres. I'm sorry, how does this affect Austin Matthews' next deal? There's no way that the Leafs are going into next year without that. Now, I am of the belief that Matthews will resign. I'm not convinced it will be long-term, but I think he will resign. And then we'll see where the cap goes. Like the thing is that one of the things that we've learned here is that, the Toronto players, and a lot of this generation of players is like this, none of them really took discounts. And it's easier to take discounts when you're winning. And that at that point in time, they hadn't won yet. Like the Canucks, when they had the Sedins, they took their biggest discount when the team could win the Stanley Cup. I'm really curious to see what all of these deals are going to look like if the players really believe they have a chance to win here. But Matthews goes first. Matthews goes first.
That's fair. And again, we'll see what happens come the springtime, but certainly the conversation will evolve after that, considering everything that happens beforehand. So last question. I've always wanted to ask you this and never have. You taught me at the College of Sports Media, if you do recall, for a couple of months. We worked together at Sportsnet. How does one become an NHL insider is a question I've always wanted to ask you.
I think it's FaceTime. I've been around now. I'm an old man now, Nick. I've been around 30 years in the business. I've been at Hockey Night in Canada. This is 20 years. And I think it's just, it's being around. And, the thing that Jay talked about there, like, it's a big deal. Like, players talk about this person's a good guy, this person's an ass. You can trust them. You can't trust them. like nobody's going to be happy with you all the time. Like this whole thing with Vancouver, I was right in the middle of that, and it wasn't an easy thing because it was crazy town, and people aren't going to be happy with you all the time, and people aren't going to like you all the time. But at the end of the day, like, do you show your face? If you say something, negative, do you show your face and answer the bell, or do you run away, or do you just show up? Like, players know. Like, I remember the first year of the Raptors, one of the Raptors players told me, "I can never remember your name, but I see you here every day." And that's the thing. Like, who's there every day? And generally, even though nobody's going to be happy with you all the time, do you try to treat people well? And I do. I'm not perfect, but I try.
I remember you on Headline Sports like it was yesterday. Elliotte, really, really appreciate time, man. This is a lot of fun.
All right, guys. By the way, I did want to mention something else too, Nick. Like, I heard Frank Saravelli's report on Jake McCabe about what it would cost to get him. I thought that was really interesting, and in particular that Frank had mentioned that McCabe didn't have Toronto on his no trade list. I don't think Toronto's going to pay that price for McCabe. I looked into that one specifically, so I did want to mention that. I thought it was a great report by Frank, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced Toronto's going there for that.
Sounds good. I think Timo Meier is the guy they should go after. Okay.
I really love that on Meier, and because the one thing I think about Meier is that like, the thing with the Leafs is you could do it and then flip him. And Dubas is the kind of guy who would think like that. Now the price is going to be enormous. Like, that's the one thing. Like, Toronto doesn't have a ton of cap room. They don't have a ton of picks, and they want to keep their picks. I don't know if they have the juice to pull that deal off. Like, I think New Jersey is the team to watch there. I think that's the team that has made it clear they like Meier and would really like to do it. So my question is, can Toronto outbid the Devils? And I think you look up and down and you see if they can do that.
Fascinating. Looking forward to seeing you at Elbow Room next week in Fort Lauderdale. Okay.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Elliotte.
Take care.
All right,
one of the premier establishments. You too. There is Elliotte Friedman, and of course, Elbow Room, one of the premier establishments in Fort Lauderdale, right on the beach, and that's where Fanfare is going to be. A lot of great nuggets there, man. Like, Elliotte is an absolute G. Frank is as well, like the OG of insiders right there, back to back, and back-to-back weeks here on Leafs Morning Take. Strong couple weeks for us, Rosie.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to get that inside. And, like you said, when you're in there long enough, you'd be surprised how small that hockey world is, man. Everybody knows everyone. You're going to run into the same people from back here in these years and back in those years. And I remember you from here, and we used to work together there. And when you got a good reputation and you're a good enough guy, you just start to have so many numbers in your phone, man, and you can kind of reach out. And if you're an honest, good guy, like you said, who's trustworthy, you can get a lot of information out of people.
All right, Rosie, speaking of information and people, time to put you on the spot right now. The wrap-up is brought to you by our friends at PointsBet Canada. I'll give you the floor, Rosie. Here you go, bud.
I can see why you dumped this on me. It's just a garbage board tonight. There's just garbage out here, like minus 400s all over the place. But anyway, I'm going to take a stab at something, and it's always a fun game to watch. It's the Penguins versus the Capitals, Sid versus Ovi, and I'm taking the Penguins right now. I think you can get them close to even money, maybe about minus 105. And just based on their last game there with the big three going again, you saw the elation on Sid's face, both when he scored and Letang scored. Malkin's getting involved there, and I think they're going to start to roll. I think that core three is going to start to show their veteran presence and their experience level. And the Caps right now are on a little bit of a slide, 2-game slide. So I'm just taking it's close to a coin flip, but my money's on the Pittsburgh Penguins right now with the the extra added boost of having Letang back in business.
Cheers to that. I'm looking forward as well to the Boston and Tampa Bay game. I think if there's ever to take a shot on a team that's playing Boston, maybe it's Tampa on home ice at Amalie Arena. So potentially you look at that if you want to extract a bit more juice. Maybe you take Tampa in regulation in that game. I know Boston's lost, 5 times in regulation, but they're going to have to lose games at some point in time, you would think, over the next 40-some-odd games. So 2 quick looks for you right there. I'm with you on the Pittsburgh front. They've just been a tough team for me to handicap this season. And quite frankly, Casey DeSmith, who's playing right now, because Tristan Jarry's banged up, just scares the shit out of me, man. I'll be honest about it. 7-6 game against Florida the other night, but I'm with you. Teammates ride together, right?
There you go, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll see if we can get me on the board here.
Yeah, so just to wrap here, this is our final show of the week with us two together. I believe you'll be hitting me with a 3 hits with Rosie tonight. You'll be flying tomorrow as we get set for the Leafs against your boy Claude Giroux and the Ottawa Senators. You think Giroux's going to showtime you, by the way? If you walk by the room, will he just act like he doesn't know you?
I don't think so. If it's before the game, he might just do a quick what's up, buddy, and maybe a bro hug, but that's probably it.
Yeah, so looking forward to that, and suffice it is to say, I think you're going to be fired up. You're going to be dancing on that flight over. What's the over/under on cocktails with you and your bro? I'll set it at 1.5, by the way, for the flight over from Calgary.
Oh shit, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. We're no stranger to it either way, but I'm just wondering how you're going to behave yourself with the open bar in the alumni box. Hopefully, I'm not embarrassed.
Buddy, I'm wearing a suit and tie for that affair. No, I'm not. We'll dress accordingly. We'll be good people. Obviously, I used to do some work for the Leafs and did their pregame and intermissions and postgame. So I'll be on my best act, but I'll be getting after it too. Somewhere in between, to answer your question. Does that work for you?
We'll have fun, buddy. We'll have fun.
Just looking at the chat before we wrap, a lot of people complimentary of our interview with Elliotte Friedman, which we'll have out. You can check it out in its duration, again, at the Leafs Nation 401, our new YouTube page. Make sure to subscribe. Meat writes in, will Nyes get into the lineup after a season is over? My best guess is yeah, and that's still a ways away. He's a Hobey Baker finalist, by the way, so good on him. He's had a really, really strong year. I think they'll give him a look. They need to sign him first and foremost. It's my expectation that he's going to turn pro and sign a new contract with the Leafs after his season. But that's a big one to monitor, and certainly from the trade direction too. Tim writes in, is Calgary first period a win? Is Calgary first when period? I can't read this properly. Is Calgary first period when? I'm guessing it's taking Calgary in the first period. I don't know. Maybe Tim's had a couple this morning.
Maybe still recovering from last night, but hey, first period win. Those are fun little bets to take too. Who takes the first period and whatnot. So there you go.
Is Calgary first period when? Maybe I'm just trying to read it too directly. I think he wants a Calgary first period win. Yorkie writes in as well. Hunt maybe, not Simmons though. His legs are gone. Okay, so people do love pugnacity on this podcast, and again, I will get off air here and laugh about that little skirmish, if you want to call it, yesterday, Keandre Miller in the walk in the park. So Rosie, excellent job. Big win for the Leafs last night over the New York Rangers, and looking forward to the weekend. Starts tomorrow night. We'll be in attendance against the Ottawa Senators. I'll see you then, okay?
Right on, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, there you have it. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and thanks again to Elliotte Friedman.